been a day of big headlines. There was a security breach at the Indian Parliament. Two men entered the lower house and set off smoke canisters. Wasn't the only surprise for New Delhi. Turns out US President Joe Biden will not be coming to India. He was expected to be the chief guest for next year's Republic Day. But Biden is caught up in domestic politics. We'll tell you why it's a lost opportunity. At the United Nations, Israel finds itself isolated. More than 150 countries, including India, have voted for a ceasefire. Could this force Netanyahu to end the war? We'll discuss that. And the troubles don't end there for the Israeli Prime Minister. He's now been accused of helping fund the Hamas, the same group that he now wants to destroy. Meanwhile, an Indian warship has arrived in Manila. It's part of New Delhi's new posture in the South China Sea. Also, why do human beings love lists? And why has a missing tomato led to drama at the International Space Station? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Argentina devalues its currency, the peso, by 54%. It's part of the new president's shock measures to revive the crumbling economy. Inflation is at 140%, poverty rate at 40% in Latin America's third biggest economy. Pakistan Supreme Court suspended its decision over military trials. In October, the apex court had said such trials were unconstitutional. The Pakistani military wants to try more than 100 civilians accused of targeting army sites during protests in May. A final decision from the court is expected next month. After days of wrangling, countries at COP28 agreed to move away from fossil fuels, but that's a climb down from an earlier proposal to phase them out. Saudi Arabia and Iraq had opposed this move. The watered-down compromise was reached at the end of the climate summit in Dubai. A Thai MP gets 6 years in jail for insulting the monarchy. In Thailand, it is forbidden to defame the monarch. The MP's posts on X are said to have broken the law. The 29-year-old former activist who is out on bail plans to appeal against the sentence. Tesla recalls around 2 million vehicles in the US over an autopilot defect. It comes after a 2-year probe into crashes at the Elon Musk-owned firm. The autopilot feature was launched in 2015. The recall applies to almost every Tesla sold in the US since then. And real life mirroring the TV series Lost. 270 Delta passengers stranded for nearly 24 hours on a remote military base in Canada. A mechanical issue forced their flight to make an emergency landing. It was a challenging day in New Delhi. Security at the Indian Parliament was breached. Two intruders entered the lower house of Parliament and set off smoke canisters. Headlines from Washington said Joe Biden won't be coming to India. He'd been invited as a chief guest for Republic Day. India had also planned the Quad summit around his visit. The tentative date was January 27th, the day after the Republic Day, but now Biden is not coming. So the summit will have to be pushed back. Reports say leaders of the other Quad members, Australia and Japan, are preoccupied, so scheduling the summit was proving to be a challenge. But why isn't Biden coming? Officials say he's caught up in domestic issues. Important bills are pending before the US Congress. Plus, Biden has a State of the Union address. So India will have to wait. And this is tricky because the India-US relationship is in an awkward spot. A few months back, they were toasting each other. Biden had called it a defining partnership for the 21st century. But now there are some tensions, especially over Khalistanis in America. The US claims to have busted an assassination plot. The target was apparently a Khalistani terrorist. And they say the plotters involved an Indian government official. That's what the US has said. An Indian government official was involved. The FBI is investigating this case. That's America's Domestic Intelligence and Security Service, the FBI. And the FBI chief landed in India this week. His name is Christopher Wray. He met officials from the NIA, the National Investigation Agency, that's India's top anti-terrorism agency. They're the ones investigating the recent American allegations. The target is said to be this man, Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, a Khalistani and a wanted terrorist in India. Apparently, this was a plot against him. Pannun is charged in more than a dozen cases here in India, but he is now an American citizen. And that's where he operates from. He gets a safe haven in the US. From there, he openly threatens India. He calls for political assassinations. Last month, he threatened to attack Air India. Last week, he said he'll target the Indian Parliament. He said, and I'm quoting, he'll shake the foundations of the Parliament on or before 13th December. Today is December 13th. We saw what happened in the Indian Parliament. No Khalistani link has been established yet, but Pannun cannot be dismissed, given what Khalistanis have done in the past. He's openly making threats from the US, and he must face action. You see, most Western reporting on this case has been one-sided. They paint India as the aggressor. They imply a high-level conspiracy as if India has some answering to do. But the fact is that a terrorist with very serious cases against him is openly operating from the US and threatening to break up India to kill its leaders. How and why is this being allowed? If any party is answerable here, it is the United States of America. Khalistan is a serious issue for India and America cannot avoid it anymore. Reports say New Delhi brought it up with the FBI chief. In his meeting with the NIA, the issue of Sikh separatism came up. The FBI is sitting on some intelligence about the recruitment of Khalistanis, and some individuals are on their radar. India wants access to this intelligence. An official from the NIA spoke to Reuters, the news agency. He said, and I quote, India has requested the US officials to share inputs on suspected individuals who have in recent years been recruited and embedded in the separatist movement. And that's not all. The FBI chief and Indian investigators also discussed another case, attacks on the Indian consulate in San Francisco. There have been 2 attacks this year. First on the 19th of March and then again on the 2nd of July, both times by Khalistanis. In July, they tried to set the consulate on fire. Thankfully, it was contained and the damage was limited, but the intent was sinister. Now the FBI is probing it. Their chief has shared some updates with India. So the US is finally taking some action, but it doesn't completely address India's long-standing concern about the Khalistan movement and how countries like the US have allowed it to thrive. How, in the name of free speech, Khalistanis are allowed to attack Indian diplomats. If this isn't resolved, if India's security concerns are not addressed, a meaningful partnership would be difficult. And in this context, Biden's visit next month would have helped, with leaders tackling this head on. Because Washington can no longer justify or condone Khalistani terror and still expect friendship from India. It is a two-way street. What does victory look like? It's a question that Israel should think about. On October 7, the whole world was with them, even Arab states. There was sympathy, there was grief, there was genuine support. Such was the brutality of the Hamas attack. But 68 days later, that is not the case. The global sentiment has changed, and in many ways, India is the best example of it. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was among the first to release a statement on October 7th. He condemned the attack. He supported Israel's right to self-defense. But now things have changed. On Tuesday, the United Nations General Assembly, the UNGA, voted on a resolution. It called for a ceasefire in Gaza. 153 countries voted in support for it. They supported a ceasefire, and among them was India. It's a clear shift in policy. A similar resolution had been proposed in October as well, calling for a ceasefire. Back then, India had abstained. New Delhi did not support or reject it in October. So what has changed this time? Listen to what India's United Nations envoy had to say.
There is an enormous humanitarian crisis and the large-scale loss of civilian lives, especially of women and children. There is the issue of observing international humanitarian law in all circumstances. And there is the endeavor to find a peaceful and lasting two-state solution to the long-standing Palestine question. We therefore welcome the fact that the international community has been able to find a common ground to address the multiple challenges facing the region right now.
So 2 concerns. One is the loss of civilian lives. More than 18,000 people have been killed in Gaza. Around 40% of them were children. And 2, upholding humanitarian laws. We've seen airstrikes on hospitals, reports of forced starvation and of course collective punishment. So India has said enough is enough. It's time to implement a ceasefire in Gaza. And it's not just New Delhi. The entire world wants Israel to stop the war now. Let's compare the 2 resolutions of the United Nations General Assembly. One was in October, the other was yesterday. Both of them called on Israel to stop the fighting. In October, 120 countries voted in favor. 45 countries abstained. But yesterday, the numbers were much higher. 153 countries wanted a ceasefire. That's 80% of all UNGA members, plus only 23 countries abstained from voting. What does that tell you? That Israel is losing the narrative war, and not for lack of trying. Their diplomats at the United Nations have tried multiple strategies. In October, they came wearing yellow stars. It was a symbol used by the Nazis to identify Jews. And yesterday, they tried something else. Take a look.
I have an idea. If you want a real ceasefire, here is the right address. This is the phone number of Hamas's office in Gaza. You can all call +970 599 3765 and ask for Yihya Sinwar. Tell Hamas to put down their arms, turn themselves in, and return our hostages. This will bring a complete ceasefire that will last forever.
No luck. 2 amendments were pushed by United Nations members. Both of them tried to add a mention of Hamas to the resolution. Both were shot down. So the message to Israel is clear. We understand the pain caused by the Hamas attack, but killing Gazan civilians is not the answer. Now the question is, will Israel listen? Well, General Assembly resolutions are non-binding. Israel ignored the one in October, and they're doing the same thing again this time. They say the war will continue with or without global support. The only one who can stop them is the United States. If Joe Biden wants to, he can pull the plug. But will he do it? In recent days, US officials have criticized Israel. They've talked about protecting civilians in Gaza. Even President Joe Biden has joined in. He spoke at a campaign event on Tuesday, and he said some very blunt things about Israel. Let me quote from what his speech was. Israel has most of the world supporting it, but they are starting to lose that support by the indiscriminate bombing that takes place. This is Joe Biden saying. Netanyahu is a good friend, but he has to change. He's got to make some moves to strengthen the Palestinian Authority. Now, these are sharp remarks. But at the United Nations, Biden keeps defending Israel. Even yesterday, only 10 countries voted against a ceasefire. The United States was one of them. All of their allies have shifted positions. The Canadians, the Germans, the Australians. Only Washington is stubbornly defending Israel. The question is why? Reports say Biden has given Netanyahu a deadline, the end of 2023. So around 18 days more. By then, he wants Israel to wrap up the war. But frankly, 18 days is a lot. Netanyahu is already under a lot of domestic pressure. The relatives of hostages want him to negotiate. Only yesterday, 2 Israeli hostages were found dead in Gaza. With each passing day, that number could rise. But Netanyahu is not shaken. He admits that there are differences with the US, but he also says the war will go on.
Yes, there is disagreement about the day after Hamas, and I hope that we will reach agreement here as well. I would like to clarify my position. I will not allow Israel to repeat the mistake of Oslo. I will not allow the entry into Gaza of those who educate for terrorism, support terrorism, and finance terrorism. Gaza will be neither Hamastan nor Fatahstan.
That's a defiant war cry. But Netanyahu needs to remember the age-old rule of war. Victory on the battlefield is not enough. You must win the political battle too. What's the use of destroying Hamas if Israel is left isolated? If more enemies pop up elsewhere? We know there's a politician and a military man inside Benjamin Netanyahu. The question is, who is doing the thinking? I come back to the question, who or what is guiding Netanyahu's actions? Because his decisions are coming under scrutiny, both at home and among international allies. Like the question of backing Hamas. It's back in focus. And it doesn't make Netanyahu look good. New details have emerged. They show how he helped fund Hamas, how the Israeli Prime Minister helped Hamas get millions of dollars every year. This is the same group that he talks about destroying now, but for almost a decade, he secured millions of dollars for them, suitcases full of cash, delivered to Gaza with Israeli security. It started in 2014. Israel and Hamas had just fought a war. The Gaza Strip was in ruins. Qatar wanted to help to rebuild Gaza, so it started sending money. But this money could not be delivered without Israeli help. And that's where Netanyahu came in. He supported the plan. Not just that, he even lobbied Washington. In 2017, the US was not happy with Qatar's link to Hamas. It wanted to sanction Doha. But Netanyahu sent his lawmakers all the way to Washington. He told America that Qatar is not a problem. Instead, it is part of the solution. That they needed Qatar for a peaceful Gaza. So Qatar continued to give money to Hamas and Israel supported them. Then in 2018, Netanyahu had a new plan. An active role for Israel in the transfer of money. Here's what he believed, the Israeli Prime Minister. Qatar would pour in millions, Hamas would spend that money on Gazans, and Israel would ensure that the money is not used for military purposes. This was his plan. It was red flagged by many people in his team. But Prime Minister Netanyahu was convinced. And soon the transfers began. Cash started flowing into the Gaza Strip, suitcases full of notes, supplied securely by the Israeli forces, from Qatar to Gaza. According to one report, Israeli forces would meet a Qatari diplomat. This was at the Israel-Jordan border. They would then drive this diplomat to Gaza, along with his many suitcases of cash. He would deliver the money, and Israel would drive him back. And this continued until 2021. Then Netanyahu lost the election. A new government came in, the one led by Naftali Bennett. But the policy continued. Qatar was still giving money to Gaza, nearly $30 million a month. There was one hiccup though. Bennett's government suspected that the money was being used for other purposes. So they roped in a middleman, the United Nations, and they began a new arrangement. Now Qatar had to give money to the UN, and the UN would distribute it in Gaza. What did Israel do? Help transfer the money and keep track of its usage to see where it was being spent. But reports from spy agencies suggest that there was little oversight. No one knew where the money was going, and it was a lot of money, millions of dollars. Hamas kept getting this money. Just weeks before the October 7th attack, the Mossad chief was in Qatar. His name is David Barnea. He was asked about the payments to Hamas. Did Israel want this payment to continue? And he said, the answer was yes. He said Israel's policy remains unchanged. Then on October 7th, Hamas attacked Israel. Netanyahu made a swift U-turn. From facilitating funds to Hamas and treating it like an asset, he began calling them enemy number one. An enemy that he now wants to eliminate completely. But these reports, these details have put him in the dock. An attack happened on his watch by the same group that he supported for years. From one wartime leader to another, let's talk about Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. He was everywhere in 2022, in posters, in parliaments, in newspapers. He was arguably the most discussed person on earth. But all that has changed. Zelensky is running out of money to fight Russia, and his banker has shut shop. I'm talking about the United States. Joe Biden asked the US Congress for more money, around $61 billion for Ukraine, but Republicans in Congress said no. So Zelensky hopped on a flight. He spent the whole of Tuesday in Washington, D.C. He met Republicans, he met Democrats, he also met President Joe Biden. His mission was to rally American lawmakers. Unfortunately, he failed. The Republicans are not going to budge. Let me tell you how the day unfolded. First, Zelensky headed to the U.S. Capitol, which is their parliament. He met senior Democrats and Republicans. Here's what the Senate Majority Leader said afterwards.
It was a very powerful meeting. President Zelensky made it so clear how he needs help But if he gets the help, he can win this war. On the other hand, he made it clear, and we all made it clear, that if we lose, Putin wins. And this will be very, very dangerous for the United States. So we cannot let Putin influence through any surrogate what we need to do for Ukraine.
A meeting can be good, it can be bad, it can also be okayish. But how can a meeting be powerful? That's what you say when talks fail. Powerful meeting. And the mood in Washington, D.C. reflected that. Zelensky had visited the U.S. Capitol in December last year. The atmosphere was very different then. Kiev's counteroffensive had been a success. Russia was isolated. Washington was draped in Ukrainian flags. Zelensky even addressed a joint session of the U.S. Congress. But this time, it was low-key. A very business-like mood, and the reasons are obvious. Kiev's second counteroffensive has failed, so US lawmakers are asking, why should we give you more money? What's the strategy here? And yes, there is domestic politics too. Republicans want to give the aid on one condition. They want more funding for the southern border, basically tougher immigration curbs.
I have asked the White House since the day that I was handed the gavel as Speaker for clarity. We need a clear articulation of the strategy to allow Ukraine to win. And thus far, their responses have been insufficient. I have also made very clear from day one that our first condition on any national security supplemental spending package is about our own national security first. The border is an absolute catastrophe, and this is because of the policies of this White House and this administration.
I know what you're thinking. Why doesn't Joe Biden just give him what he wants? Because then some Democrats may not support his bill. So it's a tough call for Biden. The White House says aid will run out by the end of this month. Plus, Congress is breaking for holidays. It will convene again in the new year. So right now, it looks like mission impossible. And Biden realizes this. During his meeting with Zelensky, the president changed his tone. He usually promises endless support, but not this time. See if you can spot the difference between Biden's old speeches and this one.
The American people have been with you every step of the way, and we will stay with you. We will stay with you for as long as it takes. I believe we'll have the funding necessary to support Ukraine as long as it takes. Will not weaken. We will stand for liberty and freedom today, tomorrow, and for as long as it takes. A powerful statement of our commitment to Ukraine as it defends its freedom today and as it rebuilds the future, and we're going to be there as long as that takes. The American people can be and should be incredibly proud of the part they played in supporting Ukraine's success. We'll continue to supply Ukraine with critical weapons and equipment as long as we can, including $200 million I just approved today.
Hope you spotted it. Biden usually promises to support Ukraine as long as it takes. But this time he did not. He said, as long as we can. So has the president changed his speechwriter, or has he changed his policy? Right now, the latter seems more likely, a policy change. He did give Zelensky something, though. $200 million. Normally, it would seem like a lot of money, $200 million, but it's just 0.3% of what Ukraine is asking for. So Zelensky asked for the moon, and Biden gave him a rock. Nonetheless, he's pushing on. Zelensky says financing is not the problem, morale is. And with or without American money, Ukraine will fight.
It's not about financing. It's about the morality. The biggest problem, when you don't support Ukraine, that people on the front line, families which are waiting for their heroes at home, that they think that the United States doesn't support Ukraine and that Ukraine is alone. And of course, people afraid to be again alone. But you have to know that even if we will stand and fight.
But for how much longer? If US funding stops, Ukraine will lose. Even Europe knows that. More than 100 senior EU lawmakers have written a letter to Congress, to the US Congress. They want the US to keep giving aid. It's a pretty rare move. Lawmakers of one country or region making a request to lawmakers of another country. It shows you their urgency. Questions must also be asked of Zelensky. Not everyone is happy with his leadership. The mayor of Kiev says Zelensky is becoming an autocrat. His commander-in-chief says the war is at a stalemate. In fact, there's a growing rivalry between the two. Zelensky and his top general, they're at odds. Some reports say he could soon fire him. He would fire the general. Things are so bad that the defense minister had to clarify.
I always joke with the commander-in-chief about this question. I ask him, who is firing you this time? In this regard, I am always open. If there are such questions, I will let you know. There are no such questions on the agenda. We had questions regarding some commanders though.
So all is not well in Kiev's war room. There is no progress anywhere. Not on the battlefield, not on foreign aid, and not in Brussels. The European Union is holding a summit this week. On the agenda is Ukraine's membership. Zelensky was hoping to join the EU as soon as possible, but one EU member is saying no. That's Hungary. So I guess the question is, why not begin talks with Russia? Moscow realizes that the momentum has swung, so they're driving home the advantage. Today they fired ballistic missiles at Kiev. It's the second such attack in 1 week. Ukraine says at least 53 people were killed, so Zelensky needs to take a call now. Does he gamble on the US Congress coming around? Does he fight alone? Or does he pursue a political settlement? Frankly, an endless war helps no one. People may talk about you for months on end, but eventually the world moves on. If you don't believe me, look at the Time magazine. In 2022, they named Zelensky as Person of the Year. This year, it's Taylor Swift. That's the world we live in. And that's the reality that Ukraine must accept. Our next story is about India's expanding military footprint, a new posture in the South China Sea. An Indian ship is docked in Manila. It is called the INS Kadmat. It's an Indian warship, and it's there on what's being called a goodwill visit. It will join a military drill in the West Philippine Sea. Now look at the timing and the setting. This is a tense region. China is at loggerheads with its neighbors. Its warships are ramming into other vessels. We told you about the collision over the weekend. One Philippine ship was hit by a Chinese vessel, another was fired at with water cannons. Tensions are on the rise here all over the South China Sea. A disputed region with 6 players. China, which claims almost the entire region, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, Taiwan, and the Philippines. They claim different parts. And they're all being bullied and threatened by China. Now it seems India is stepping up. India's envoy in Manila has spoken. He says they have shared interests. Both want stability and peace. And these shared interests are driving India's engagements. The diplomat said, and I'm quoting, India will continue a strong Navy and maritime security engagement, not just with the Philippines. India is part of drills with Vietnam too. They kicked off this week in Hanoi. 45 Indian officers are in Vietnam for this drill, an 11-day-long military exercise. The goal is to improve interoperability. And this has been a growing trend, India's military engagements, with a special focus on the South China Sea. It started some 4 years ago. The Indian Navy went for a drill in the South China Sea, their first joint military exercise. The other participants included Japan, the Philippines, and the US. In 2020, they joined another drill with Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Australia, and Indonesia. All of these were part of that drill. And these exercises are important. They show India's expanding role, its rise as a regional power and a security provider. And this is underscored by recent defense deals too. There is great interest in the BrahMos missile. The Philippines bought 100 of them in 2022, 100 BrahMos missile. Vietnam is also looking at buying them. It has already invested in Indian frigates. The first one was delivered in June this year, the first Indian frigate to Vietnam. In fact, last year, India's defense minister was in Vietnam. He handed over 12 high-speed guard boats to Hanoi. And for this project, India gave a line of credit to Vietnam worth $100 million. So you could say that India helped Vietnam pay for these boats. And this deal serves as a model, a template for future agreements. But more importantly, it sends a message to China. India is now actively involved in the South China Sea, and this is driven by self-interest. India wants to ensure freedom of navigation. so that key shipping lanes are open and trade routes remain accessible. India also wants vital natural resources to be protected, like oil and gas. But New Delhi's biggest concern is security. China wants to usurp territory that belongs to others, both on land and in the waters. And this leads to constant friction. It raises the risk of conflict. But India wants to prevent a war. Southeast Asia is a gateway for the Indian Ocean. A conflict here will hurt our interests. It will have an impact on India's trade exchanges, on energy investments, maritime borders. The flow of goods would be disrupted. India has energy investments in Vietnam. An exploration deal was sealed in the month of August. It gives India access to an oil block in this region. If there is war, this access could be hampered. Hence all these moves to dial down tensions and to keep China in check. But as India seeks to contain turbulence on the high seas, it is dealing with chaos at home. A shocking security lapse took place today inside India's Parliament building. Intruders set off smoke canisters in the well of the House, the lower house of Parliament. Let me break that down for you. Some miscreants managed to bring smoke bombs into Parliament, sneak them past all the security measures, enter the well of Parliament and set off the devices within inches of the MPs. That's definitely a grave security failure. What's worse is that it took place today, December the 13th, exactly 22 years since the Indian Parliament was attacked by terrorists. On 13 December 2001, 9 people were killed by 5 Pakistan-sponsored terrorists. A memorial for the victims was held earlier in the day, and then we had this security breach. Here's a report.
These were the scenes from India's lower house of Parliament today. Parliament was in session. MPs were giving speeches. But then, 2 men set off smoke canisters in the well of the Lok Sabha. They jumped from desk to desk, shouting slogans and sowing chaos, evading MPs and security personnel. Both intruders were eventually captured and beaten up by the MPs before being taken away. Quite a few MPs got in on the action. The intruders have been identified as Sagar Sharma and Manoranjan D. How did they get in? Apparently, Sharma at least was the guest of an MP. Both were officially allowed to enter the visitors' gallery, but they jumped down from the gallery into the well. Both of them had smoke canisters on them. They set off these canisters on the parliamentary floor. The cans emitted yellow smoke that engulfed the Lok Sabha. Preliminary investigations say the smoke wasn't harmful, but that doesn't make this incident harmless. The intruders managed to sneak the canisters inside. They could have brought something more deadly. Why didn't the security system at the Parliament building, at India's temple of democracy, detect the danger? It raises a lot of questions.
The incident that happened today is a topic of concern for all of us and is serious as well. A high-level investigation is being done and accordingly action will be taken. A comprehensive review will be done regarding the security in the House.
But there wasn't just chaos within the building. 2 others created a nuisance outside Parliament as well. They've been identified as Neelam and Amol. They too set off some smoke canisters. Both of them were also apprehended. Despite no permanent harm, today's incidents have left a bitter aftertaste because of the significance of the date. Today is the 22nd anniversary of an attack on India's Parliament. In 2001, 5 terrorists armed with guns and suicide vests entered the old Parliament building's premises. They snuck in using just a fake sticker on their vehicle, saying that they had the clearance, and those terrorists were allowed to pass. They proceeded to kill 9 people. If not for the heroics and sacrifice of India's security forces, they could have killed a lot more. It should have been a never again moment. India remembers it every year. The parliamentarians honour the fallen every December 13th. They did so today as well, which is why it is shocking that the security lapse took place on today of all days. The Indian government has cracked the whip. For now, visitors have been temporarily banned from Parliament. India says it will beef up security and that an incident like this will never happen again. Now, we can only hope that this was the last security breach at India's temple of democracy.
Person has jumped from the visitors gallery. We'll try to get some more details when it comes to what has happened inside Parliament, but what we are learning is that a person seems to have jumped from the visitors gallery. This is a huge security breach in the Lok Sabha, and also we've got access to those visuals. We'll play them out very soon for you. There seems to have been a security breach in the Lok Sabha where a person has jumped from the visitors gallery. This is a huge piece of news that's coming in, where the breach has also been caught on camera, where a person has jumped from the visitors gallery in the Lok Sabha. That's the piece of news that's coming in. Those visuals will get you very soon, ladies and gentlemen, where a massive security breach has now been reported from the lower house of Parliament, where a person has jumped from the visitors gallery. Remember, the visitors gallery open to members of the public, but they go through a massive security vetting when it comes to entering the lower house of Parliament. Now what we are learning is that a person has jumped from the visitors gallery. Those visuals on your screen, where it seems that a person has jumped from the visitors gallery. A massive security breach, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to the proceedings inside the house. Those visuals on your screen, where it seems you can see the person just jumping from the benches, jumping from the visitors gallery, then jumping across the benches. Those visuals on your screen, where the person, as you can see, the security officials are also trying to chase him down, to corner him, and to contain him and to restrain him, as the person is jumping across the benches. A massive security breach inside Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. Those dramatic visuals on your screen, you can see the person jumping from the visitors gallery and then just jumping across those benches, and as he is being cornered by those security officials. I'm joined by my colleague Payal Mehta on the broadcast, who's getting us this piece of breaking news. Payal, give us the details.
Well, I'm going to just tell you some details, and I'm joined by a member of Parliament from the YSR Congress, Mr. Sanjeev Kumar, who was there on the floor of the House, and we'll ask him what really happened. So, what really happened?
The two youths, they jumped from the gallery into the hall, into the house. So, they have lit two crackers. They were around 15 centimeters length, and they were yellow in color. It was throwing out huge fumes. We were terrified that it could be some poisonous gas, and we were also terrified that it could be some bomb. So immediately our colleague members of Parliament and the security people overpowered them, and both the people were dragged out of the house.
Let's turn from an actual security threat in India to an alleged security threat in Ethiopia. Their Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has cracked down on a dissenter, one of his former ministers. Security forces have arrested him. And who is this man? Well, until last Sunday, he was the State Minister for Peace. His name is Taye Dendia. He was sacked on Sunday and arrested yesterday. What was his crime? The police say he was plotting a coup, and he's been arrested for, and I'm quoting, collaborating with anti-peace forces that are trying to destroy Ethiopia. Look at the irony. A peace minister collaborating with anti-peace forces and arrested at the behest of Nobel Peace Laureate Abiy Ahmed. Sounds perfect. The Ethiopian police raided his house. They say they recovered multiple phones, laptops and iPods. They also picked up, and I'm quoting again, many flashlights, Kalashnikov rifles, and guns with bullets. That's an interesting way for the police to put out a list. They also said the former minister endorsed violence on social media and criticized the Ethiopian government. And perhaps that last part, criticizing the government, is where it all starts to make sense. You see, this minister was a critic, one of the rare critics in the government of Abiy Ahmed. Just last week, he tore into the Prime Minister. He blamed Abiy Ahmed for the failure of peace talks with the rebel group. It seems that was the last straw. To understand this entire episode, we need to look at the current state of Ethiopia. It's a diverse country of about 112 million people, home to multiple ethnic groups. The largest group is of the Oromo people. They make up over 34% of the Ethiopian population, the Oromo people. Then there are the Amhara people at 27%. Tigrayan and Somali people make up about 6% each. And then there are other smaller groups. Now, Abiy Ahmed came to power in 2018 as Prime Minister. Since then, he has overseen multiple inter-ethnic conflicts. Let me tell you about the three biggest ones. The civil war in Tigray that ended last year. A conflict in Amhara that is still on. And the Oromo issue, which is long-standing. So throughout his prime ministership, inter-ethnic tensions have been on the boil. And remember, the Ethiopian Prime Minister is a Nobel Peace Prize winner. But he's struggling to keep peace. Recently, there was some hope. Last month, the Oromo militia held talks with the government, the second round of talks, and there was hope during the second round, but then the talks failed. And a spate of attacks took place immediately after. Dozens of people died in this round. And since 2018, almost 9,000 people have died in Ethiopia's Oromo region. That's when the latest round of conflict began in 2018. 9,000 people dead and counting, and peace talks have failed. So the minister slammed the prime minister. He was promptly sacked. Then he took to Facebook with this post. He called Abiy Ahmed a barbarian who plays with human blood. These are harsh words, and they may have landed him in jail. He's been accused of collaborating with anti-peace forces and conspiring to overthrow the government. His wife has apparently been asked to vacate their home in 3 days. All of this reeks of retribution and puts another stain on Abiy Ahmed's record. There were a lot of hopes from the Ethiopian Prime Minister in 2018. He won the Nobel Peace Prize. He was expected to bring stability to Ethiopia, but his tenure has been anything but stable and peaceful. I've said this in the past and I'll say it again. There should be a mechanism to rescind a Nobel Peace Prize. And Abiy Ahmed would be a good candidate to start with. Meanwhile, in China, the real estate sector is in a slump. A few years back, Beijing bet everything on real estate. It was their growth engine. Real estate delivered up to 30% of China's growth. But a few months back, the entire sector collapsed. Developers started defaulting on their debt and left thousands of home buyers in the lurch. Until now, the impact of this collapse was limited to China, but now it's being felt beyond its borders, like in Malaysia. They have a Chinese ghost city in Malaysia, a $100 billion luxury project that has tanked. Most apartments are sitting empty and the buyers seem to have no recourse. Here's a report.
It promised to be a paradise in southern Malaysia. The structures are built on reclaimed islands, surrounded by luxury facilities. There's a water park, a garden maze, a beach, a shopping mall, and a golf course. Everything that you can wish for. The forest city was supposed to have it, but the project failed to take off. Today, the forest city is called a ghost town. Barely 15% of the project has been built, and fewer than 10,000 people live here. But that's just 1% of the planned occupancy. The rest of the complex lies deserted. When the project was launched 7 years back, few had questioned its viability. Country Garden, a major Chinese developer, was behind it. They promised to invest $100 billion in the project, but their grand vision is far from being realized. So far, just $4.3 billion has been invested. Now its future seems uncertain. Country Garden is struggling. It has amassed almost $200 billion in debt. The developer has suffered losses, it has missed debt payments, and sales of homes are not picking up. In September this year, Country Garden's sales collapsed, dropping by a whopping 81%. With the turmoil back home, the future of Forest City seems uncertain. Country Garden says it's not abandoning the project but needs money to rescue it. The Malaysian government has stepped in. A few months ago, they made some announcements. A special financial zone was created in Forest City. Visitors have been promised special perks like a special income tax rate and multiple entry visas. Malaysia may need to do more than that. It needs money and investment to flow towards Forest City. Chinese developers might struggle to provide that. Reports say they owe as much as $390 billion. These are unpaid bills from operations. Then there are the loans. Country Garden owes over $190 billion. Evergrande is another developer in distress. It owes a whopping $340 billion. The defaults have hit the sector hard. In recent years, as many as 53 Chinese developers have collapsed, and there could be more in the coming days. China has its own ghost cities. Going by one claim, there are 65 million empty homes in China. Real estate developers built these homes, but they couldn't fill them up. China's real estate sector grew on the back of large loans, but now there's an oversupply. There are more homes than buyers, leaving Chinese officials with fewer options to revive failed projects.
Friends, Romans, list makers, lend me your ears, because it is that time of the year again. List makers are in manic mode the world over. They're trying to process the year, trying to organize this messy, confusing world into sliced and diced, bite-sized chunks, compiled as lists. As 2023 comes to a close, the internet is awash with lists yet again. Whether it's the most searched words of 2023, the most stylish people, the best books, songs or places, or even the weirdest research projects. Lists are everywhere, which begs the question, what is it about lists? Why do we love them so? Simply put, because lists work. And this is according to research. It's all thanks to human psychology. At the risk of being ironic, here's a list of reasons why lists are so appealing. For starters, it is FOMO, or the fear of missing out. Humans collectively hate it as a species. So lists are hard to resist. For instance, you almost want to know which celebs broke up this year without really wanting to know. Secondly, lists feel definitive. We know exactly what we're getting. Whether it's about why the human body is so disgusting or why Nicolas Cage is a gift to humanity, lists reduce uncertainty. They make us feel in control. And you don't need to be an unhinged type A person to know that it feels good. In fact, science proves that feeling in control is good for us. I bet micromanagers everywhere feel vindicated. The third reason why lists are great is because they're less taxing. You see, information is exploding like confetti from different corners at all times. It can be overwhelming. And that is where lists come in. They make it all feel more manageable. These factors define year-ender lists, but they apply to other kinds as well, like to-do lists. Sometimes asking people to make a to-do list feels like you're peddling a cult fantasy. It seems like a Ponzi scheme, but it really isn't. If done right, to-do lists decrease anxiety, they provide structure, they make goals more achievable and give us a record of everything that we have accomplished in a given period. And that last bit is important. You see, goals mindlessly float in our brains. They occupy space. They distract us. Because humans remember things we need to do more than the ones that we have done. And there is a scientific term for this. It is called the Zeigarnik effect. When scientists studied waiters, they could only recall orders before they had been delivered. After the dishes were served, their memories were erased. The deed was done, so the brain was allowed to let go. The same psychology applies to to-do lists. Seeing what we have achieved frees us, which is why most of us swear by them. This person went a little too far by tattooing a to-do list on their arm, but it makes sense. Wherever you look in cultural history, you will find lists. From hidden treasures to medicinal plants, lists go way back. We saw them in the Arthashastra, written in the 3rd century, an ancient Indian treatise on statecraft. It lists reasons why people lack motivation and why economic distress increases. There are lists in literature too, like in the 1920 novel Ulysses, where James Joyce describes everything his protagonist finds in his drawers. It's a literary list. It tells us so much about the character. There are lists in songs too, like in Taylor Swift's Karma, where she describes what the word means to her. To her, karma is thunder or a queen. Apparently, even the guy on the Chiefs. So lists can be lyrical, they can go viral, they can also save lives. Oskar Schindler, a German businessman, comes to mind. Reportedly, he used a list of names to save more than 1,000 Jews from concentration camps. Despite all of this, if you still feel lists to be neurotic, you can start small. Write a to-do list for yourself and witness the magic. It might just be the Gandalf you need. Because with the right list, even the smallest person can change the course of the future. Tell us how it goes. And for our last story tonight, let's talk about the greatest space mystery. And no, I'm not talking about black holes or dark matter. I'm talking about the mystery of the missing tomato. It may sound like an Enid Blyton novel, but it was playing out in real life at the International Space Station. A tomato grown in space went missing, not making this up. Scientists pointed their fingers at the man who grew it, an astronaut called Francisco Rubio. They said he may have gotten hungry and just put it in a sandwich. 8 months later, the great mystery has been solved. The missing tomato has resurfaced. Rubio is no longer guilty. All is well in space again. But the question is, where did the tomato go? Our next report takes a look at Tomato Gate that rocked the International Space Station.
In the vast expanse of the cosmos, there are many mysteries that remain unsolved. But one such trivial mystery has caught the attention of planet Earth. The mystery of the missing space tomato. This tomato went missing 8 months ago, leaving behind a trail of confusion, accusations, and a taste of interstellar intrigue. It all started on the International Space Station. NASA scientists lived there, and some in their free time were growing vegetables. I guess sustainability is not just for Earth. This tomato was part of the Veg 05 project. It was the first tomato to be grown in space. And the man who grew it was Francisco Rubio, aka Frank. He harvested it and then put it in a little bag. But when he went back to get it, the tomato was nowhere to be seen. Of course, misplacing things isn't just an earthly thing. It can even happen in space. Rubio says he remembered velcroing it, but when he went back, there was no bag or tomato. Now, in space, things are weightless. Unless you anchor them, they can float away anytime, hide in a nook or cranny, basically disappear for a long, long time. Rubio thought that's what happened. After all, the International Space Station is 365 feet wide, so it could be anywhere. Plus, it's a humid environment, so even if it disappeared, it would be rotten. But Rubio found himself at the center of a tomato-shaped storm. Speculations ran wild that Rubio had succumbed to the temptation of the ripe fruit, that it became a midnight snack in a moment of cosmic solitude. There were many accusations, but Rubio never gave up. He searched for the tomato every day for about an hour or so. Of course, it was a huge burden. He had to clear his name. But the tomato was never found. Until now. A group of astronauts at the International Space Station have finally found it, or what remains of it. They haven't said where it was or what condition it was in, but they have said one thing. Rubio is finally innocent. Basically, case closed. The news comes as a relief to Rubio. Justice has been finally served. So is this the end of Tomato Gate? The cosmic curtain has finally fallen on this unexpected drama.
Vantage continues after a short break.
Any idea, were they shouting out any slogans? Did they shout slogans against?
Yeah, they were shouting, but we could not, it was not clear for us. So we were all concentrating on the thing in their hand. We thought they were trying to throw it at some person. And one short fellow, he was trying to go to the speaker. So immediately some Lok Sabha member, he was a Sikh, he immediately overpowered him and he was dragged outside.
Is this something like this that one has seen for the longest in Parliament? Because I don't remember seeing anything like this in Parliament ever.
No, I have never seen, we have never heard. And this is very serious security breach. And even people who we get, they don't allow anything.
But this person was trying to hide something in his shoe. Is that something which happened?
Maybe he has taken one matchstick from the shoe and then he lit the cracker.
All right, you know, Ayushman, an eyewitness speaking to us, telling us what really happened. It's a major breach. Never in the history of Parliament. Because, you know, Ayushman, whenever we also enter Parliament, we are thoroughly checked. You know, everything is checked. All our equipment are checked. Even, you know, officials are not even allowed to carry their chargers and their mobile chargers with them. That's the kind of security that you really have around Parliament. This is very, very shocking for everybody who has seen it. And of course, the YSR MP who was there on the floor of the House telling us the first-hand witness over there.
Absolutely. Let's recap for our viewers what we've learned so far, ladies and gentlemen. Two youth jumped from the visitors gallery. They burst crackers. They sprayed something inside on the floor of the house. Yellow fumes came out and they were shouting slogans. But we are not...
Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Spain, police seized 11 tons of cocaine after multiple drug busts. 11 tons. In Beijing, giant pandas enjoy snowfall as the Chinese capital deals with a severe cold wave. And 700 soap bars were used to relocate a landmark hotel in Canada. You must watch this video. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1937, Imperial Japan captured the Chinese city of Nanking. What followed was one of the most violent episodes in history. The Japanese killed 200,000 civilians, also raped at least 20,000 women. Historians call it the rape of Nanking. With that, it's time to wrap. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Good evening. You're watching Breaking on CNN News 18 with me, Akanksha Swaroop. Now, on the 22nd anniversary of the 2001 Parliament attack today, Lok Sabha witnessed a major security breach. A man identified as Sagar Sharma jumped out of the visitors' gallery into the Lok Sabha well and shouted slogans Kala Kanun nahi chalega, Tanashahi nahi chalegi. The MPs ran for cover as this attack unfolded. The man reportedly carried colour bombs hidden inside his shoe. The visitor pass of the accused has also been accessed, which was issued by BJP's MP Pratap Simha and his office. Now, 5 people have been detained by the police, and the police have ruled out terror attack angle completely. The purpose of this attack remains unclear, but the initial report suggests that the rising unemployment and inflation might be the reason for this attack. Security has been beefed up post this incident, with the roads leading up to the parliament being cordoned off.
We are at Vijayanagara in Mysuru, near the residence of one of the individual who breached the security at the parliament today, Manaranjan. And I'll ask my VJ to pan the camera and show you the visuals bringing in from the residence of Manaranjan in Mysuru. Right now, the police officials, the crime department is near the residence questioning the father of Manaranjan. As you can see in the visuals, the father of Manaranjan, Mr. Devraj, is being questioned by the crime department. Earlier this day, his father, Manaranjan's father, Devraj, said that his son was is an engineering graduate from engineering college in Bengaluru, and he graduated in the year 2014-15, and he wasn't interested in any work. Sometimes he used to work with his father, and he also revealed that he used to travel to Delhi and Bengaluru very frequently. But his father also says that he was not aware of the fact of him being in such activities. He was also quite shocked to hear about this particular activity today, wherein he breached the security at the parliament with smoke canisters today. So right now we are bringing you the visuals from his residence. The police officials, the crime department are here questioning father of Manaranjan. So the police officials have also been stationed here, around 4 to 5 police officials, including constables and few officials from the crime department have been stationed here. Earlier in the day, DCP of Vijayanagara division also arrived here. He sought information particular in relation to the activities of the individuals.
ಎನ್ಕ್ವೈರಿ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಫೇಸ್ ಮಾಡುವಂಥದ್ದು ಅವ್ರಿಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ ಸರ್ ನಾವು ಅಮಾಯಕರು ಆಯ್ತಾ ಸರ್. ಈಗ ಪಾಪ ಈಗ ನೀವು ಬಂದು ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರಿ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಏನು ಉತ್ತರ ಕೊಡೋಕೆ ನನ್ನ ಹತ್ರ ಉತ್ತರನೇ ಇಲ್ವಲ್ಲ ಸರ್. ನನಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ಸರ್ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ. ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಅವ್ರು ಯಾರು ನಮ್ಮನ್ನು ಸರ್, ನಾನು ಒಬ್ಬ ಫಾರ್ಮರು, ನಾನು ಯಾವ್ದು ರಾಜಕೀಯದಲ್ಲೂ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಗೊತ್ತೈತೆ ಸರ್. ಈಗ ಏನು ನಡೆದಿದೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ತಿಳ್ಕೊತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ಮೀಡಿಯಾದ ಹತ್ರ ತಿಳ್ಕೊತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ಮುಂದೆ ಏನಿದೆಯೋ ಅದನ್ನ ಏನು ಇವತ್ತು ಕಾನೂನಿದೆ, ಸಂವಿಧಾನ ಇದೆ, ಅದ್ರ ಪ್ರಕಾರ ಏನು ನಡೀತದೆ ಅದಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ ಸರ್. ಅದು ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಾವು ಏನೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲದವರಿಗೆ ಪಾಪ ನೀವು ಬಂದು ನಮಗೆಲ್ಲ ಇದು ಮಾಡಬೇಡಿ ಸರ್. ಏನು ಹೇಳಿ ಸರ್, ಅವರು ಏನು ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ, ಆಕ್ಚುಲಿ ಡೆಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಹೋಯ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳೋದೇ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿಗೆ ಹೋಯ್ತೀನಿ ಬರ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ ಸರ್.
And with regards to the Lok Sabha security breach story, we have some breaking inputs coming in. We are now learning that the Ministry of Home Affairs is setting up an inquiry panel headed by DG CRPF Anish Dayal Singh. This inquiry panel is going to be set up on the request of the Lok Sabha Secretariat, is what we are learning. For more details, Arunima joins me on the phone line. Arunima, share the details of this inquiry committee and how many security agencies are we looking at when we talk about this committee?
So this committee has been set up. The notification has been issued after the Lok Sabha Secretariat sent a request to Ministry of Home Affairs. Anish Dayal Singh has already initiated the preliminary probe into it. He has taken over as DG CRPF, officiating as DG CRPF. He was present in the Parliament complex today with the Commissioner of Police of Delhi and Union Home Secretary. So in this committee, there will be representation from Delhi Police, there will be representation from the Parliament security staff, there will be representation from the Intelligence Bureau and the paramilitary forces which are guarding the Parliament premises. What is their mandate? Their mandate is to ascertain where all the lapses happen. If there are multiple layers of scanning, frisking and checking, why is it that this duo managed to enter the Parliament visitors gallery with the spray, which is a foreign object not allowed? How did that lapse happen? And what can be done to prevent it? Already some steps have been initiated by the Parliament security, like stopping visitors from entering Parliament for now, ensuring that the visitors gallery is encased in glass. Whenever visitors come back to Parliament now, they will see there will be a glass partition for them. There will also be body scanners being set up. So some steps have already been initiated. But this committee by Anish Dayal Singh has been asked to submit its report at the earliest on what else can be done.
All right, many thanks to you, Arunima, for bringing in those inputs. We have some more breaking inputs coming in. We are learning that the Parliament has now issued a circular post-security breach in the Lok Sabha. The Parliament has issued a circular to all the parliamentarians. There's been also details of a media briefing centre which has been set up at the UN20 of the North Utility Building of the Parliament, which will facilitate the members, is what we are learning. There'll also be regulated access as far as the Parliament House is concerned. For more details, let's quickly go across to Payal. Payal, share details shared in this circular. We are also learning that a smart identity card for members of Parliament will also be introduced.
Well, a smart identity card, Akansha is already in place for members, but for members who have not got it ready, because whenever a member tries to enter the House or tries to enter the Parliament, there is a facial recognition by which it says pass and it says cleared. So that's something also, once again, which is being reiterated by the Lok Sabha Secretary, essentially asking members to get that done so that there is no a problem in terms of their entry, because, if it shows fails, then you're looking at the MP's face. Sometimes, security personnel to allow them inside. But this could actually be a very, very tricky situation. Also, the fact that several MPs had raised as to why the media was lurking around in the Parliament premises also be given to understand that we've been told that from tomorrow for any soundbites, we'll have to go to a particular designated area. So that's once again been reiterated by the Lok Sabha. However, the Lok Sabha will once again issue an internal circular, essentially to tell you what really will be the guidelines from here on in terms of where the media could stand, what is the possible position that the media could stand in, what are the rules and conditions that will apply, because we broke earlier, Akansha, that MPs, PAs and PSs will not be allowed inside Parliament complex anymore till further orders, and of course several other steps are being taken in terms of monitoring who goes to the galleries. Now that the Lok Sabha has decided not to issue a visitor's pass, but in the official gallery and in the media galleries, nobody wants to take any more chances anymore. So obviously you'll see beefed up security, and a mechanism is going to be devised to see how they can actually allow people to enter the visitors gallery whenever it's busy.
All right, many thanks to Payal Mehta for bringing in all those details. In fact, we have some more breaking inputs now pouring in. This is with regards to a multi-agency probe. Now, CNN News 18 has accessed details of a multi-agency probe. Top intelligence sources are telling CNN News 18 that first agencies probing their association with various ideological groups, and that their homes and associations are also currently under probe. For more details, let's quickly go across to Pallavi on the phone line. Pallavi, what are the questions that these the multi-agency probe is now looking answers for?
The ideological grouping that they belong to, was there a reason behind it? Have they been in touch with each other? That's where the call records, all of that has been tracked on. Were the four of them in constant touch with each other, Akansha? Because that's also going to give us a clue into whether there was a full-fledged, pre-planned decision to go and attack today. Also, individually, of the two main accused, there has been a tracking and investigation and preliminary investigation which has been done, which has thrown up some of the details, for example, that we've already put up. For example, Neelam is believed to be ideologically very tilting towards the leftist groups. Could that have had an impact? As far as Sharma is concerned, he's believed to have been impressed by the Bhagat Sena outfit.
Right.
And,
in fact, Pallavi, I'm going to request you to continue staying with me because we have some more breaking inputs coming in. This with regards to Sagar. He is an e-rickshaw driver in Lucknow. Top intelligence sources are revealing that teams have reached his house in Alambagh, and last month he had gone to New Delhi and was associated with the Bhagat Singh fan club. Right now, agencies are ruling out any association with any terror group. Pallavi, I'll bring you back in on this. Just something that you were talking about. Do throw more light on the details that have now emerged.
That's right. So that's exactly what I was talking about. The police has been in touch with them. The police has reached his home, not just him, but also any of those who are aware of them, their whereabouts. They don't have they have details of the two other accused as well. And as we were talking about, in the case of Sharma, who is the main pass that we have been showing, he's believed to have been impressed by the Bhagat Sena group. Did that have an impact? Was there a coordinated strategy in place before that attack took place? In the case of Neelam, as we talked about, there seemed to be a leaning towards a leftist ideology. She did take part in the Kisan protests as well. But apart from that, was she a part of any ideological political outfit? Those details will be dug out.
In fact, we have some breaking inputs coming in on Neelam. But before that, let me also quickly play out a reaction that has come in of Sagar's grandfather. Let's listen into what he has to say.
दोस्त को हमने आज तक देखा ही नहीं है। हाँ, कहाँ का था, मतलब उधर का ही था, इधर का
हाँ
था?
हाँ, कहाँ बेंगलोर, और हम बुढ़े आदमी हैं, ना जा सकत ना आ सकत। यहाँ के कोई दोस्त नहीं है। हाँ हाँ।
कब गया यहाँ से दिल्ली?
ये शायद परसों गया है।
किसी से कुछ बता के गया ना दिल्ली?
अरे हमें कहाँ बताएगा, बताए हुए तो अपने बाप को माँ को, हम अलग रहते वो अलग रहते, इतना हमें मालूम है। ये परसों गया है।
किसी झगड़ के गया हो? झगड़ा
नहीं नहीं नहीं।
तो यहाँ क्या करता था? यहाँ क्या करता था?
अरे यहाँ कोई हुनर नहीं तो वो टैक्सी चलाना, रिक्शा।
दिल्ली में कोई रिश्तेदार रहता जहाँ गया?
दिल्ली में इनका कोई रिश्तेदार नहीं, को आज तक नहीं बिटिया जानकारी है कि इसके कौन से दोस्त हैं, क्या करता है क्या नहीं करता है। हम यही कहते थे तुम कब बड़े होगे कुछ करोगे।